Hello everyone and welcome back to the EL111 coursebook. In this video we're going to be going over the second part of Unit 2, Unit 2B, and what makes a great story. We're still continuing with our stories. Before we dive into our reading, I want to focus on this focus right here, the writing, and it is something called structuring a narrative. So when you're writing a story, we follow a similar structure, and this is divided into 6 different stages, and this helps to basically paint a picture, especially a vivid picture, for the reader or the person that is reading your work. So let's start with stage 1, which is set the scene. It was a Saturday afternoon, so the cafe was very busy. Setting the scene is you basically giving the reader something to imagine the environment of, or where does this story or whatever you're writing take place. So in this case, it is a cafe that is very busy because it's a Saturday afternoon. So again, this gives me a very good picture of what is going on already. Next, you'll introduce the characters. I was having coffee with my brother Alec. Introduce the characters of the story before you go forward, because imagine this in not writing format. Imagine a movie and you start seeing characters that have basically you have no recollection of who they are. They've never been introduced. This is the same concept, but in writing. Rising action. This is basically the suspense that you build that something is about to happen. So this hence the reason why it's called rising action. Alex seemed very nervous. I knew he wanted to tell me something. Again, remember, rising action is the part right before the climax, which is right here. Climax is where basically the thing that we've been rising suspense for ends up happening. It could be negative, it could be positive, that depends. So just as we were about to leave the cafe, he told me he was going to change courses. Do business instead of medicine. And I said, great, I think you're doing the right thing. So this is the climax. Falling action. He was so relieved, and we laughed a lot about how nervous he was about telling me. Falling action is what happens after the climax, the relief that everyone was fine, or what ended up happening afterwards. And finally, we have the conclusion. Alec changed course at the end of term. He says it was the best decision of his life. Your conclusion basically concludes what you've been writing up to that point. Okay? Now, let's take a look here at this text. And what I want you to do, as you guys know, is a pretty regular occurrence now in my videos, is I want you to pause the video for 30 seconds, and I want you to quickly read this text just to get a general idea of what it's about. Okay? All right, so I'm going to assume you've read this and you have a general idea of what this is. Now, we're going to be reading this one more time, but this time I want you to take a minute to a minute and a half. Again, pause the video and read a little bit slower so you have a better idea of what is actually happening in the text. All right, so I'm going to continue the video as if you have done both of these things. I've already read this, so now let's go to the exercise. Here it says, I should probably have this a little bit bigger so you guys can see. A, where and when does the story take place? We'll say, again, we're reading this for detail here, so if we read, it'll say NASCAR Sprint Cup in 2015. So we could say at NASCAR Sprint Cup in 2015. Okay. Who are the people involved? This would be Brad Zalowski and crew members. C, what happens before the main event? They come in for a pit stop right here. So come in for a pit stop. What is the main event? Main event is a car crashing into 2 crew members. Okay? E, what happens after the main event? After the main event, he apologized, if I remember correctly. Yes, he did. So him apologizing over the radio. So we'll say he apologized. And F, how does the story end? Were all the people unhurt? Thankfully, yes. The most important thing, this is our conclusion, if you guys remember. Most important thing is that nobody was hurt. They were very lucky. Let's say nobody was hurt. Okay, let's go over these one more time. Actually, let's check our answers first. Here we go. Where and when does the story take place? It takes place at NASCAR Sprint Cup in 2015. Who are the people involved? Brad Keselowski and crew members. What happens before the main event? Come in for a pit stop. What is the main event? A car crashing into 2 crew members. E, what happens after the main event? He apologized over the radio. And F, how does the story end? Were all the people unhurt? Nobody was hurt, thankfully. Okay. Now, let's take a look at exercise 2. Look at the story in exercise 1 again. Use the notes in the focus box to identify each stage of the story. Okay. This is a pretty good way to look at our narrative in a bit more detail here. So let's see if... Okay, good. We have it here. So like we said, set the scene. The scene will be, it was 2015 and I was at the NASCAR Sprint Cup race at Pocono Raceway. Okay, so this is the scene. It gives a very good idea of what the environment is like. Introduce the characters will be, here you go. The racing driver, Brad Keselowski, was coming in for a pit stop and the crew members were getting ready to change his tires. Here we've introduced the racing driver, Brad Keselowski, and crew members. Although we haven't mentioned specific crew members, we've also introduced them. Next, we have rising action. Remember when I said this is us building suspense? Here you go. The car came in at high speed and the brake locked. This is rising action. Afterwards would be the climax. This sent the car crashing into 2 crew members and they both just flew into the air. One landed on the bonnet of the car and the other fell onto the ground. Falling action would be what comes after the climax. They both got back on their feet and finished the job. Keselowski drove away and we could hear him apologizing over the radio. Despite the spectacular crash, Keselowski had a good race and finished second. And then finally, conclusion, most important thing is that nobody was hurt. They were very lucky. Or actually, we could say it starts from here as well. Despite the spectacular crash, Keselowski had a good race and finished second. But the most important thing is that nobody was hurt. They were very lucky. Okay, so this is, again, another example of structuring our narrative based on the text here. All right. Look at the photo on page 32. Is this page 32? I believe it is. Oh, no, it's this one right here. Okay. Which narrative stage is it showing? If you guys had to guess for a second, only looking at this picture, which stage do you think this is showing? Yes, it is the climax. You could see that they've been hit by the car. One went flying and the other went flying as well, but one landed on the bonnet. So this is definitely the climax. Okay. Let's go to exercise 4. Put the 6 parts of the story. Okay, so it looks like we have a story. Let me just take a look here. Looks like we have a story consisting of 6 parts, just like the narrative that we talked about. And it's based on the photo here in the correct order, so identify each stage. All right, so we have, I'm a photographer, and that's my brother. He's a professional surfer. This is introducing the characters. We want to set the scene, you guys. So the scene looks ocean, waves, surfboarding. He tried to write it, no. Quickly move the boat. No. He laughs about it now. Look right here. I took this photo in Australia about 2 years ago. So it looks like this is something that was taken on Australia 2 years ago. We're setting the scene. We're starting our narrative. Okay? And then two, we need to introduce our characters. So I'm a photographer, and that's my brother. He's a professional surfer. So this is us introducing the characters. Next, we need rising action. So rising action would be quickly move the boat towards him. We're all shouting his name because we were really worried about it. No. He laughs about it now. No, he tries to write it, but it was too... Oh, look here. On that day, I was on a boat with two other people, and my brother was waiting and waiting for a wave. We were both getting quite bored. Yes, this is the one that we want. So this is rising action. It was enormous, but still, nothing happened. Remember, we're building suspense. After that, we need the climax. So, oh, look right here. He tried to ride it, but it was too big and fast, and he was thrown into the air. Again, very similar to the other text that we were going over and how they got thrown into the air when the car hit them. We quickly moved the boat towards him. Okay, yes. This is afterwards. And again, finally, this is the falling down. We quickly moved the boat towards him, and we were all shouting his name because we were really worried about him. It seemed like a long time, but finally he appeared. He had a cut on his head from where the board hit him, but it wasn't serious. He laughs about it now. He says danger is just part of his job. So this is the conclusion. Okay? So this is the mini text in narrative structure order, like we studied. So you can take a picture of this if you need, or pause the video and take it, do whatever you got to do. Okay. I think on that note, that concludes. Actually, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. I have one more thing for you. All right. So now that you have a good idea about how to structure a narrative in your texts and in your stories, written stories, that is, what I would like you to do is choose something that's happened to you. Perhaps it could be a vacation, a day at school. Choose something that is quite different from your daily life, something that was unique. Perhaps you got into an accident, or you saw someone flying, or I don't mean flying, I mean like someone that got hit, or it doesn't have to be negative, but these are the things that are coming off the top of my head. Perhaps you were on vacation and you saw someone surfing as well. You saw someone jump from a pool from really high ground. All of these could qualify, but it does have to be about your own life. And then I want you to write your own story using this structured narrative that we talked about. I want you to set the scene. What was the scene like? Pretend that you're both the writer and people are going to read this, so they need to understand what was the scene like. Perhaps you could say it was a sunny afternoon on the beach, something like that, okay? And then introduce the characters. Who are the characters? Was it your brother? Was it your sister? Was it you? Was it you and others? Again, totally your choice. Then start rising action, start building that suspense, and then go through the climax, finally falling action, and then conclude your text. Okay, so this should be your own little homework, if you will. Write these down. Let me know how it goes. On that note, this concludes Unit 2B. I hope you guys had fun, learned something new, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.